We start tonight with the build-up. It's an extraordinary one for both clubs because there's selection issues galore across both teams, Lloyd, which is unusual this time of year.
There is, Hutchie. Heartbreak for Daniel McStay last week. Taylor Adams, I think they're very, very smart by making the decision early. So don't let it drag on later in the week. And Billy Frampton amazingly trained with the A-grade side today, the first, and clunked some marks and trained exceptionally well. So, Kane, I know you've discussed it a fair bit last week, and I probably agreed with you that I wouldn't probably go down the Frampton track because he hasn't played forward much. He would hardly have kicked too many goals in his career. There's Payne doing some run-throughs. I'd nearly make the decision on him as well and just select Gardner, who did a fantastic job last week on Curnow. But could Frampton just purely try and take out Harris Andrews, and that's his job for the day?
Yeah, he possibly could, Lord. I like him more as a defender than a forward, and I would replace McStay with more of a specialised forward in Ginnivan, go a little bit smaller. Mason Cox can play your more permanent forward role. Darcy Cameron can ruck, and then I'd actually bring Noble into the side just to combat the plethora of small forwards that Brisbane have, and he gives you some flexibility there, and Lipinski would be the one for me that is vulnerable, Caro, but it is a tough week, isn't it? We forget the human side. I want to know you wanted to highlight a couple of those.
Well, Taylor Adams obviously really, in his experience, really hurts the club. We watched the faces at the Brownlow last night of players like Daniel Rich, who sort of joined the new era Collingwood, of Brisbane after the Premiership era, and obviously Will Ashcroft, who wasn't good enough to win the Rising Star, but the umpires certainly
missed a lot of football.
Not that much, but the umpires certainly noticed him last night. But I want to talk about Dan McStay, former Brisbane player who made the big move to Collingwood. 20 years, as I think Michael Gleeson pointed out the other day, that they lost Anthony Rocker before a grand final. Obviously, a far more impressive player, I suppose, really. But how much is that going to hurt Collingwood?
Yeah,
not having the big forward.
I think they'll be okay. I think he's been a serviceable player without being outstanding. Others would say he's been more important than that, Lordo. Certainly, since he's come back into the side, he's been better, and he was really good against the Giants before he got injured, but I think they can cover him.
Yeah, he plays such an important role, Kane, so I've been critical on him as well at times for the lack of goals and disposals, but if you look at the
goals are everything, Lordo. Can they kick enough goals?
Look at this. So this is 20-plus goal kickers for the season. And look at the Brisbane model. So everyone bar Gunston will play this weekend. And so they've got guys who can kick you 2 and 3. There's 6 or 7 of them. But look at Collingwood, they've got 3. So Myercheck, Elliott and Bobby Hill. Ash Johnson won't play. His hand's still in a cast and McStay's injured. So that's where the pressure's going to come.
That's as good a forward line, the one on the right there, that we've seen heading into a grand final for a long, long time. They got firepower everywhere, Hutchie.
It sure is. It sets up the Collingwood final spotlight.
It does, Hutch. And I'm putting it on Jamie Allen this grand final because he's had a couple of poor finals. So we've put it on Charlie Curnow a fair bit in the last couple of weeks. But look at that, Jamie Allen, 6 disposals and 0 goals and 10 and 1 in the prelim. And I reckon his kicking's gone off a little bit. He's lost his nerve. He was the clutch player. And I think when your confidence drops as a player, also your kicking can go off as well.
And as he goes, they go often. And they haven't scored more than, 60 points in 2 finals.
So that's where I think their defence is the best in the game. Their defence has won them 2 games. But I think they'll need to kick 85 points to win this grand final. But they've won it with 60 in the first 2
So
finals.
he probably needs to kick 3, I reckon, if the Pies are to win. I think it's an excellent spotlight. I'm just highlighting Lipinski, as I mentioned. I wouldn't play him. I'd have him as a sub probably because he gives you some flexibility. Now, I know Noble and Lipinski isn't a like for like, but I was concerned with his form on Friday night for these reasons. He was incredibly fumbly. He went to ground far too easily. He wasn't physical in a game that stood out as a real physical one. This is going to be on Hutchie. I mean, they've got Neil, they've got Rayner, they've got McCarthy, they've got physical players. If you are not and doing this, and then your ball use goes as well, that's where I think he is vulnerable. I suspect he holds his spot, but the spotlight is on him.
And I think Charlie Cameron's due. I don't think he's had 2 fantastic finals either. Just 11 disposals and 10 respectively, and 3 goals in those finals. But he's a matchup. He takes out a fantastic player, whoever you want to play on him. And Adam Sard was the one who played on him last game, and they lost run and drive out of defence because of Sard. So I'm thinking Quaynor is in that good a form. I'm sending Braden Maynard to him. And leaving Quaynor up higher to keep running and repelling.
I actually agree with that. I think he's a better matchup for Cameron, but offensively what he's been giving, if you focus on Cameron, you lose that as well. Grand finals are won in pre-season, Hutchie, and this is the reason why Craig McRae spoke about that after that prelim final win.
Even after the game, I mentioned on the whiteboard, 2 years of doing one-on-one fight drills. Like we do it every session. 2 minutes of it, tick off, 2 minutes, next one. I don't know how many hours that is, but you saw some of those contests in the last quarter, how much we rehearsed those moments.
It's such a good insight. 2 years of doing this, and then it comes off in a big way in a prelim final. This was as high pressure and contested games I've seen for a long time, and they refused to be tackled. It didn't matter whether it was a second-year player in Dacos. Bang, that's green, can't tackle him. Goey, I reckon Lordo would have broken 6 to 7 tackles on the night, which allowed space to be freed up and the disposal under a lack of pressure. Saw my check there, we're seeing Goey again. So this is what it has taken to get them into this position. That's why I think they're well prepared, but as are Brisbane, Caro.
You mentioned Goey. He was magnificent on the weekend. He didn't get his due from the umpires. We've got a fair way to go. More on the umpires and the Brownlow a little bit later on. But at the start of the season, you were strong on Goey. You put it on him to improve and to lift. Can we believe the hype? Time for underwhelming Goey to deliver. And you said the 27-year-old's career leads like a tale of inconsistency. He went on to highlight his best and fairest record and some other things. He's capable of so much more, and he's delivered since then.
I'm not sure fully. He certainly delivered on Friday night.
That's the reason they're in the grand final.
He's shown a lot of maturity, but when I wrote that piece, that was accurate, and it still is accurate to this day.
It's not accurate now. He's gone past that phase of his career now. He's become elite.
This year he was suspended for knocking out an 18-year-old.
You don't think he's had a good year?
I think he's had a solid year, but he was...
A solid year?
Yeah, a solid year. He wasn't... For his talent, Hutchy, I think, at the age of 28 by round 1 next year, on what he is capable of, he's under-delivered. When you compare...
pivotal to their season.
Yeah, no, I agree, and he'll be pivotal on Saturday. And it was as good a game as I've seen him play on Friday night. But across the board, he hasn't consistently delivered that. But credit to the club for backing him in, because I thought he had played his last game for Collingwood last year, Caro. So the maturity they've shown.
St Kilda obviously, took the proposal to the board, and the board knocked it back. So not that he might have necessarily been as good a player at St Kilda. If we're going to be backtracking, Craig, we have to go back on your comments over the years about Chris Fagan. You've been very critical of Chris Fagan.
Incorrect.
You've talked about him as a great man manager, but questioned his tactical coaching. And you've talked about the fact that he changed his team when he never really did change his team. He's had the same assistants around him pretty much since he started at the Brisbane Lions. Are you prepared to say now that he deserves to be considered one of the great coaches?
The same thing to you I do this time every year when you bring it up about the same time every year.
The first time they made a grand final, so you haven't.
So you've raised this August or September every year since 2018 when I said that. At the time I said they were poor defensively and he needed to own that, and he did. And this year they've been outstanding, and this is the first year they've got their defence right since then. The first year they've had team defence sorted. The first year they brought in talent to help them do it if they weren't able to coach it or didn't cut through at the time. Dunkley's been a huge in, and given the pressures he went into the season under, I think he's been magnificent.
I think he's the overall package. Yeah, he went to a footy club that was on its knees.
It's a fair argument from Hutchy, though, like in terms of...
He's criticised him since 2018, but I'm not going to get technical.
But that was the last time we spoke about it on the show, and I said that he was a great man manager, but he had yet to prove himself as a great tactical or defensive coach.
He's changed his demeanour, though, Hutchy.
First year he has, and it's been magnificent. And I thought he deserved to be coach of the year ahead of Adam Kingsley today. And I
think he's been well supported, and he's had some good leadership around him. Greg Swan spoke to us on SEN in November about one of the changes he was going to make this year.
There's actually a chance that Fags might go back up in the box this year, so he's contemplating just for something different, just to... I think probably with the maturity of the group, I think, he originally went down there so that he could be, close to the players. What you thought, with the young blokes coming off and on the ground, just sort of talking to them. He just thinks that we've got a bit more of a mature group now, and it might be time to go back.
It's been a great change. This is some of the vision when he was on the bench and he was losing a little bit of composure. That must have been Lordo distracting for players at times. You can see they're not really engaged in that. Versus this, look at the score and look how calm he is. Yeah, he's chewing the gum, but he's in control. He's looking at things that they can adjust. He's got a coaching panel that's been with him for a long time. I think that's been an excellent change, and his demeanour has certainly helped his side.
It was a very calculated response on the weekend. The MCG record is a thing. Now, we talked a little bit during the year about this. The best chance of winning the flags to come once and just hit and run on grand final day. It's a different style of home ground on grand final day because the crowd's a little bit not as quite as weighted as normal. And the history doesn't suit the interstate clubs.
No, it doesn't, Hutchie. And I've tipped against interstate sides for a number of years because of that reason. And you look at it, it's 2-7 since 2012, and some of them have been really, really poor losses. So I think it's
tight wins only, West Coast and Sydney.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that it's the advantage of playing a more parochial crowd, knowing the MCG well, and some teams just not handling it well. But Brisbane are ready to go, you think?
Sets up our Lions final spotlight.
So what can they learn from the Giants, the Brisbane side, as they go into this game? One thing they can learn is you don't want to be launching the ball from too far out. Now, I thought the Giants lost all composure late in this game. 7 intercept marks in the last quarter Collingwood took. Now, if you kick the ball to that position in the ground, they will make you pay badly. And if you bomb it high and if it comes from wide, it doesn't matter who it is. It's been Pendlebury. Ward launches that ball from too far out. The ruckman Cameron got back and he got himself into good form. So the Lions mustn't lose their composure.
Don't you think that was tiredness?
Well, perhaps.
Which shouldn't be a problem for Brisbane.
You can't afford that, Caro, though, because you're feeling the pressure and all you want to do, okay, I'm just going to bomb it in long. That Hogan there is a poor decision in that moment. So time and time again, they did that. Brisbane have got to be better and braver and bolder with their ball use than what the Giants were.
With Collingwood, what they've done really well is they took the game away from Melbourne in the first final. It was 5-1 at quarter time, and then against the Giants they kicked 2-0. So what Collingwood do, they attack you early, and I didn't like what I saw from Brisbane in that first quarter. Yes, they responded, but I don't think they'd come back against Collingwood on grand final day. So these are some of the moments of panic in that first quarter from the Brisbane Lions. So that's just a hack kick from Zach Bailey. Their excuse, this is a poor kick from Robertson. Watch the body language of Hipwood there. So this is the big ask of Brisbane. Can they start the game well? I think that's what you must do on grand final day against Collingwood, because they'll come hunting. And this was, you're going, oh. And so it's a fantastic response from Brisbane, but they're now playing against the best side in the competition across the whole season. So must start well, and Collingwood will be hunting.
I like that phrase, Lordo. They'll come hunting. Yeah. So when they come hunting, how brave are you going to be with your ball use? I thought Brisbane got back into this game with their ball use off half-back. Now, Carlton's forward pressure wasn't to the level that Collingwood's will be, but if you have a look at what Coleman did off the half-back line out of centre bounce and give your forwards a one-on-one opportunity. If you have a look at this, there is a lack of forward pressure that Collingwood will be much stronger at. How brave and bold are they going to be? The 1-2 there from Zorko, the run, the carry, that's what got them back into it. So will Collingwood be able to shut that down? And if they come hunting like Lordo says, will Brisbane keep coming at them with this style of play? Well, it's a fascinating game. I can't wait for it.
It's not often umpiring that gets the greats of the game really riled up, particularly a classic preliminary final, albeit maybe a fairly scrappy one. But both Luke Hodge and Lee Matthews on their respective radio shows the next day were scathing. Let's have a listen.
It'll be interesting to see how many of those umpires get a job next week, because if you go through a lot of those free kicks that were missed, they will not be at the MCG. And I'm not being harsh on them. This is a prelim final and the umpires put the whistle away. A lot of those decisions were pathetic. They did not do a good job last night.
Last night's total failure to protect the player with the ball, even by modern standards, I reckon was appalling. There was 24 free kicks paid. Only 24. Why did it happen that 4 of the good umpires, went to a game and decided just not to pay free kicks, not to protect the player with the ball?
Absolutely fascinating. So obviously 2 of the umpires, not what Luke Hodge wanted, actually get to umpire on grand final day. Interesting, Brett Rosebery got a big award today at the Carbine Club, having just learned that he hadn't got a game. Was obviously pretty shattered, I'm sure, Kane. But interesting, Luke Hodge was so strong. I didn't watch the game on Friday night because I was at the game. It's funny how the commentary doesn't always reflect that, does it?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think there's a directive from Channel 7 not to be critical of the umpires? Because he certainly was nowhere near as critical during the coverage on Friday night as he was the next day on your station, Hutchie. So I just wonder whether there's an instruction from Channel 7. I'm sure that they would say that there is not. But in the moment, that's the sort of commentary, perhaps not quite as strong, that I want to hear during the game, and that insight probably not the next day.
Well, it's funny, you hear it on radio, but you don't hear it on television. Too many dollars at stake, who knows?
Let's talk about the Blues for a second and the Giants, the vanquished. Just interested, Lord, well done to the Blues, an amazing season. They look more accepting of the loss for me. You had lots of high fives and hugs and all those things, and the fans were happy, and Voss clapped them off, and But it was in contrast to the Giants, who looked hurt, wounded. Toby Green, who'd been there before, doesn't know whether they can get back there again. It just seemed to me to be like a kind of sense of Carlton of, it was a great run, we'll be fine next year, we'll go a step further. Whereas that looked like, how often can we get back here? It's hard. It just felt different. I wonder what your views were. Were Carlton hard enough on the loss? They were 5 goals up, weren't they?
I think, Hutchy, that so many of their players hadn't played in a final at Carlton, so it was a thrill for them to get to the prelim versus the Giants and Toby Green, who's just had so much heartbreak losing grand finals and prelims. But what we're making here is there's no guarantees on next year. So you've got to take the chances while you get them. And the Giants blew it and Carlton did blow it. 5 goals to 1 up, or 5 goals to 0 in a final. And yet they're not there on grand final.
We discussed last week on Monday what the Carlton side should do with Harry Mackay and whether they should play him. I said I wouldn't have. I thought he was okay during the game and played his role a little bit. But this caught my eye from Ash Hansen,
this is aimed straight at you,
their
Kane.
assistant coaches.
Straight at you.
He said he was flabbergasted, he was bemused, and he was shocked by the chat that the Blues were better without Mackay. Now, that may have always going to be playing him, but I'd be staggered if they didn't have a serious discussion about that in match committee. That says to me that they didn't even consider it.
That wouldn't have been considered. You're an island on the
Bossy said straight away he'd be back.
Yeah, he did, which surprised me. I thought there would have been more debate than that for this reason, because how it affected De Koning, and we've also showed their lack of forward pressure. I thought they were too tall, and there's only a small sample size there, but De Koning was excellent against Melbourne in that semi-final. He was forced to play more in the ruck there, and there's the drop-off. So ongoing, next year they've committed to Pitnet with 4 years. De Koning's the future. Harry's got 7 years. He's about to kick in Curnow. How they get the combination of the 4 of them is going to be interesting next year.
And just quickly on the Giants, 14th, I think, to 4th or similar. Kingsley Coach of the Year. Fantastic achievement. They traded out Taranto and Hopper. We put a doomsday around them trading them out. Do you feel a little vindicated that the quicker midfield helped them and that it feeds your Taranto argument a little bit despite his top 10?
No,
is that a sign of what we're going to see from mids, from clubs not fearing losing players but replenishing midfield?
Well, we've spoken about that a lot on this program, haven't we? Often when they do lose a key player, they end up better off. So
they had too many midfielders. It doesn't really matter who they were. They had too many of the same players.
There was a lot of concerns about losing those two. What they got for them was 12 and 31 and pick 6. They cleaned up. They got Bedford in. They now got Callaghan and Green. Their future is in a really good spot.
And those long-term deals you've all been very critical of now look pretty smart because they're not indexed to the new CBA.
Yeah, and losing Taranto and Hopper Caro will not hurt them one bit.